But today we're going to move on and we're talking about our rights. And the first thing to realize is there is a difference between rights and privileges. And it doesn't look like it wants to, like, it doesn't auto capture the window again. It's like lame. But we're gonna fix this right now in front of our face because we have some other information that we want to go over here while we're with it. I just can't believe it. It just doesn't auto fix that, which is weird to me. Can't just make sure it always works. But the right privilege distinction, you have to know the difference between a right and a privilege because a right and a privilege are not the same thing. A right is something you have a right to do. A privilege is something granted to you by the government. And a lot of people think our rights are privileges, but they're not. And some people think privileges are rights, but they're not. So there are two distinct ways to distinguish between privileges, rights in the context of the American constitutional law and history. This is from Cyclopedia.com, and careful analysis does not confound the two. The text of the Constitution refers to both privileges and rights and uses privileges as a term of art denoting a class of rights that may be invoked defensively to excuse one from a legal restraint or obligation. And another usage, privileges have both an inferior status to and a less permanent existence than rights, being subject to revocation by the government and or imposing conditions on their exercise, and there is no foundation in the Constitution for the latter distinction. So as you can see, with that said there, a privilege is something that can be revoked. It can be taken from you at any time. If the government gives it to you, it can grant it to you, it can take it back. My right to bear arms wasn't given to me by the government. I was born with it. My right to assembly wasn't given to me by the government. I was born with it. My right to speech wasn't given to me. It was by the government. I was born with it. My right to be secure in my person's place of things wasn't given to me by the I was born with it. Same with my right to not have to quarter soldiers in my home. Uh, all these, like, an example of a privilege would be the right to drive. Now, you have the right to use the modern conveyance of the day in your life pursuit happiness according to the Supreme Court. So in the eventuality that it's life threatening and you have to, and you have no other choice but to drive and you don't have a license, you can technically do it. But license is a privilege. You don't have to be able to drive. They don't have to, like, the government can give you a license and they can revoke it. It's a privilege. It's not a right. The government can't tell me I can't bear arms. It can't revoke my right. Which means we should actually have a better chance of, like, when people go to jail and they get out, to get these rights back because they're technically absolute. They're not revocable by the damn government, and we really do need to learn that. In the Constitution, a privilege is one kind of right. The word privilege appears 4 times. The first appearance of the privilege from civil cases in habeas corpus in Article 7. The privilege is social. Where are we getting the rights? The word right standing along with the word freedom, and the phrase right of the people is used in the Constitution to designate a right that one may assert affirmatively in which the government is precluded from invading. See, this is the inalienable rights. The government can't do anything about these. Allowing the government to restrict our movement during these lockdowns, it's bullshit. It's not the government's purview to tell us we can't assemble. It's not the government's purview to tell us that we can't open our business. It's not the government's purview to tell us what we can and can't say. It's not the government's purview to, like, do any of the things that the government's been trying to do over the last few months. And that's why I thought it was really important that we go over people's rights here in this episode of the podcast, because some of you either don't care or you don't know. And if you don't care, I can't help anything. I can't help that. But if you don't know, I can help educate you so you do know, and you know what your rights are, because they're important. And that begins with knowing the difference between a right and a privilege. So, like, Among these are natural rights, which attend to the Constitution, such as the freedom of speech, right of people keeping their arms, and the right of the people to secure in their person's house, papers, and effects. This is what I've been talking about. Another category of constitutional rights comprises of procedural rights. This is both civil and criminal. This is your right to like a speedy trial and such. These are important things to know, that you have a right to these things. The indefinite detention clause for American citizens of the National Defense Authorization Act, unconstitutional, illegal. You have a right to a speedy trial. Twitter telling you can't speak on their platform, violating 230. You have a right to speak. They can't. The government corporation, they can't do that to you. It's fucking BS. You need to learn how to stick up for yourself and know the difference. So like you have a right to access to medical health care, but you don't have a right to the services of another. The services of another is a privilege. That you gotta like know these distinctions, or you're gonna get caught with your finger up your ass. Like, there's no other option, no other way to say that. And yeah, there's really no other way to determine that piece of this besides what I just said. So